Hey there, I'm RJ. I wanted to do my first book review video about The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay by Michael Chabon. I read this book at the beginning of the year on like January 7th or something is when I finished it. And I'm only now getting around to actually posting the review because I had a bit of a backlog from kind of taking September to December sort of off. So I'm posting a lot of stuff from back then, but we're finally in 2025 books. This book was so good that I just really need to put my review out there in a way that people might actually watch or read or something, because I really want people to read this book. So I have my notes to the side here. So if I'm looking this way, I'm just trying to remember what I said. I've got my book here. I don't think I'm going to do any quotes or anything. I know a lot of people do things like that and do sort of read-alongs. I didn't film anything like that at the time when I read this. I so wish I did, and I'm thinking of, other books that I might be able to do that with. I've been reading a lot of shorter books, so it's not really relevant. But if there's any longer books that people want to see reviews of, let me know, and I might do some sort of filmed read-along or something. So if you're a mood reader like me, you know how rare it is to find a book that not only fits your exact mood to multiple criteria, but is also one of the best books written in the 21st century, having come out in the year 2000. This was that book for me. This book fit every single criteria I could have wished for and is universally regarded as being a really good book. So all my friends know that I've been on a bit of a queer historical fiction kick. If you follow me on Goodreads, if you follow me on Instagram, it's really obvious. It's all I've been reading almost, except for like advanced reader copies, since mid-December of last year. So this was actually kind of early on in that kick. Some of those friends know that I've also been on a bit of a superhero kick since the Superman 2025 trailer. You can tell when I wrote this is before I've publicly read like 30 comics on my Instagram. That is not a secret anymore. The cat's out of the bag here. I was getting really into the superhero hype at this time. And this book is about comics. It's about comic books in 1938-ish to like 1940 and the 1950s. So if you've read that book or even like heard anything about it, you know that historical fiction and queer historical fiction and superheroes are all relevant to this story. So Cavalier and Clay has been on my radar since about 2014 as a book I knew that I should read and that I knew I would like. But the length at 639 pages, I know it doesn't look as much here, but it's 639 pages, made it seem too intimidating. I thought about taking it out from the library or buying it, but I knew I just wasn't in the mood yet since I'm a bit of a mood reader. So eventually I forgot about the book outside of it just kind of being on my Goodreads to read shelf for all this time, nearly a decade at this point. Whenever I cleaned out the shelf, I would think to myself, I really should read that. And then I didn't. Until this summer, on a walk with one of my friends, I found a copy in someone's little free library. This copy had sat on the shelf for a few months until mid-December when, after reading a few historical fiction novellas and getting unironically excited for Superman 2025, I realized that it was the perfect time to finally tackle this book and to not feel intimidated by its length. Despite that length of the book, Kavalier and Clay is a deceptively easy read and with engaging and dynamic prose that really call to the superhero comic origins and events of the book themselves. Like the reading, it reads like a thriller, not a thriller, like an action. It's very dynamic and very fast paced when you're reading it. I really felt every time I picked it up like I couldn't put it back down again. I was burning through this book. The book follows the lives of cousins Joe Kavalier and Sam Clay as they embark on a career making comics, creating and launching superheroes that become beloved to the public. Now, their creations are fictionalized, but they do make reference to some of the real superheroes that are coming out at that time, how those inspired their work, and then sort of the consequences and rollout of that. For Joe, who came to Brooklyn from Prague in 1938, funded by the last of his family's money and aided by the magician he'd once apprenticed under, this is a means to an end of getting his family out of Europe before it's too late. So we are having a setting of New York in 1938 to 1940, right on the brink of the Second World War. We follow the cousins as they work together to create something at the dawn of this medium, to build relationships and try to navigate early 1940s New York. If one of my problems with Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow is that it felt ahistorical, that was in contrast to how grounded in reality this book felt while I was reading it. It didn't feel like someone in 2000 writing about the 1940s. It just felt like the 1940s, even with the brief moments where we get to know something about the fate of the characters and future, and things that they say like much later on. There are a couple interjections, just like in Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, where it's like, oh, so and so said in 1996 or like whatever. I'm not thinking of something exact right now. I know in both books they have those sort of interjections. In this one, in Kavalier and Clay, it felt much more natural and grounded, whereas it really took me out in Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. Similarly, Kavalier and Clay is much more grounded in its themes of family, the creative process, and religion. Both the characters in this, being cousins, they're both Jewish, and that is very important to the characters that they create, to the story being told, and to the themes and messages in this book. Meanwhile, Sophie from Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow is also Jewish, and I don't think it comes up more than, like, it's not really relevant. It comes up a couple times, but it doesn't actually inform her character in a really meaningful way or the further themes in the book. I've already recommended this book to people, and I know that I likely will for the rest of my life. It is definitely one of those books. Already, I am fairly convinced that this is going to end up on my wrap-up of my top reads of 2025, and I finished it in the first week of January. That is how good this book is, and that is how much I'm still thinking about it 3 months later after having finished it. I honestly want to reread it now, and it's only been 3 months since I read it. So I'm going to hold off, but I might download an audiobook or something this summer because this is a book that I want to read for the first time again, and I haven't had that feeling a lot. So that's the end of the actual review part that I wrote back when I actually wrote the review for this book in January. There was a couple additional thoughts I wanted to add that have occurred in the last couple months. I finished Sir Patrick Stewart's memoir, Making It So, fairly recently, and in it he mentioned that one of the reasons he signed on to do Picard, which is a follow-up show to Star Trek Next Generation, which was his like big thing, or first big thing outside of doing the theater. He mentioned that one of the reasons he agreed to do it was because Michael Chabon was one of the writers on that show. And I kind of famously was not a huge fan of Picard. I didn't love the first season. Second season's okay. I don't think I've watched the third season yet. I watched like a couple episodes. But I think most people agree the third one's the best. So even if there's issues with that show, I think it's really interesting that having read this book, this is the book he cites as having read, is what inspired him to actually agree to do Picard, even though he didn't particularly want to or thought the story of Picard was finished. And I think my last thought here is that I am a big like book thrifter. I buy secondhand books all the time. This was from a little free library. I am a frequenter of my Value Village, and there's a book that has been on the shelf for the last 3 or so weeks, probably more, and I kept debating picking it up but not doing so. And it was another Michael Chabon, Telegraph Avenue. So I will be reading this soon. I'm very excited. It was only like $4. It is not in good condition. Whoever donated this read it to rags, basically. But that's the joy for me of getting secondhand books. So I am very excited to be reading this. If you have read it, let me know down below what your thoughts were. And I'm very interested in hearing that. What did you think? Have you read The Amazing Adventures of Kavalier and Clay? What do you think? Have you also read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow? And do you also think it's kind of a discount knockoff of Amazing Adventures of Kavalier and Clay? Have you read Telegraph Avenue? Have you watched Star Trek Picard? And is it interesting to know that he wrote some of it and was involved in that process? Let me know. So hope you have a good day, and I will see you at the end of the month.